Hi, it's Dawn from Dawn's Dirt. Dirt can mean gardening, dirt can mean homesteading, dirt can mean politics, dirt can mean religion, dirt can mean anything we want it to mean. And today I am doing a solo sode on the top 10 reasons why you, everyone, all of us should be a homesteader. And yeah, welcome to this episode. I've got 10 reasons why everybody, if you live in the city, if you live in the country, if you live in the Timbuktu, it doesn't matter. Everyone should become a homesteader again. I can remember back in the day, think back to the 50s, things like that. Everyone had a 10 by 10 garden in their backyard. I was just talking to, I forget who it was the other day, but they were saying back in the day, every grandma, every nana, every, baba, whatever you want to call her, every woman or family had a garden in their backyard, even if they lived in the city. And if you lived in a apartment building, you had a few things growing on your balcony. And so we need to get back to that. And I'm going to tell you today the 10 reasons why we should get back to that and how you can just take simple steps to get back to that in the space you have. So the first thing you need to realize is that you don't need a lot of space to grow food. When I moved off my farm, I had a 43-acre farm. I had a 36,000 square foot greenhouse. I did 20 acres of garden. I had 35 ewe sheep, ewe mamas, plus all their babies. I had 299 laying hens. I've done meat birds. I had some cows at one point. I had some bottle babies a few years ago. You name it, I've done it all on a farm. And so, yeah, you don't need that to have food and food security in your own space. And so one of my biggest fears moving off my farm when I sold my farm, made the business decision, tic-tac-tician business decision to sell my farm, was what will I feed my family and how will I keep my food sovereignty? How will I, know where my food comes from? How will I, keep my food and my farm? How will I continue farming is really what it came down to. And so, yeah, I was able to land in the country. Thankfully, I've got more space than most. But when I was looking at houses in town, I would go into a backyard and I would go into a house, and the first thing I would do is head for the backyard and think, man, where can I hide my chickens? And man, how many meat birds can I do here? And how many laying hens can I have here? And where can I put the garden? Those were the most important things to me when I was looking for a home to buy. And that was even in the town of Olds. Thankfully, I landed out in the country. I have access to about an acre and a half to 2 acres here. And I've got 150 laying hens. I've got right now I'm down to about 180 meat birds. I have 5 goats. I have 3 pigs and 1 dog. And I think I'm good for a while. I think I don't want to get any more animals because that's lots for this size property. I have a garden. I have a little greenhouse. I've got flowers. I am very self-sufficient on my space that I have. And so, but you don't need to be that big. Even if you have a backyard balcony, one of my former business associates, she called me up probably about a year ago, and she said, Dawn, I had a balcony. She said, I had a balcony, and it was very sunny, and I grew pole beans, and I had so many pole beans and so many beans that I didn't even know what to do with them. So I ended up throwing out some of them. And so she just didn't even know how to can them. And so that's the thing, is we need to get back to those roots. And so you don't need a lot of space to grow food in the space you have. So in towns and in cities, you can do container gardening, you can do microgreens, if you've got some windows in your house, you can do a lot with that. If you've got a little space that you can grow, put in a little rack, you can do a hydroponics operation. You can grow lettuce. I don't think that lettuce should be sold in grocery stores. There is no reason that all of us couldn't be growing our own lettuce in the spaces we have, because lettuce and microgreens are one of the easiest things to grow. So yeah, you just have to be creative. You have to think outside the box. And that's what homesteading and that's what farming is. Homesteading and farming is thinking outside of the box, coming up with, imperfect solutions to problems. And that's what I did on my full-size farm for many, many years. And that's what I'm doing here, even in this small space. And that's what you need to do in your backyard. So think of your space, think of whatever space that you have right at this moment. Think of your home, think of your backyard, think of your whatever, and just think outside the box and be creative. And then when you're doing that, give me a call. Let's chat about it and let's make the most of that space, because I'm a garden coach. I'm a homestead coach. I want to see everybody being self-sufficient. Do you remember the toilet paper wars of 2020? Are you worried about being prepared in an emergency? Are you tired of being a slave to the corporations we purchase from? It's time to take control. Become ungovernable. Take your food system into your own hands. Hi, I'm Dawn, a coach dedicated to helping you live like grandma used to. Self-reliant, resourceful, and prepared. Whether it's raising chickens, growing a garden, canning your own food, or even milking a cow, I'll teach you how to thrive and survive in the space you have, big or small. We can even potentially make some money off your homestead. Visit Dawn's Dirt today to book your free jumpstart call. Together, as a team, we can get you self-reliant and ungovernable. We, the people, have the power to take back control. Remember, if you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. But if you teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime. Let's build a better future and a community, one skill set at a time. Yeah, just start off with one thing. Start off with one pot, one planter, one, something that's food that you're growing for your family in your space. And so, yeah, the second point I want to make is that food freedom is independence. So during COVID, I had tons of people coming to me and they were saying, you've got food, right? When I had my farm, I was selling thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds of food every week to my customer base, to my people, to my community. And, they meant the world to me. And I had people, honest to goodness, crying when it came down to the mandates and the rules and regulations here in Canada. They were so afraid that the rules and regulations would get even worse than they did. Thankfully, they didn't, but that they would get even worse than they did. And I can remember one young daughter. Well, she's probably my age, but we'll call that young because why not call ourselves young? I'm 44, and she brought her senior mom to this farmer's market in Calgary, and she was weeping when she realized that yes, I was actually a farmer. She said, this woman lives on Vancouver Island, and she said she knows where her food's going to come from. If she was ever banned from a grocery store, or the debit machines went down, or whatever doomsday thing you might come up with, I don't like to focus too much on that, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. And so she was saying she was worried about her mother who lives in Calgary. She had her food situation carved out on Vancouver Island, but what was her mom going to eat? And I just looked at this woman and this mama, this senior woman, and I said, don't worry, I have a farm and I can feed you. Just get out to my farm and I'll look after you. Don't worry. And both mom and daughter wept. And when it comes down to it, food is a fundamental need. We all need food. And so if the thought of not being able to get food put people in a panic and put people in a tizzy, and yeah, I was able to put people at ease saying, I've got food. Now that I've sold my farm, that weight of that mom weighs on me. And I thought to myself, how can I turn this around? And I'm now teaching people how to grow food in the spaces that they have, because you know what? You don't need me to look after you. You really don't. Each one of you that's listening, and each one of you that's, tuning into this podcast, and each one of you that's trying to think a little bit differently about our food system, you have the power. You are able. I can tell you right now, with a little bit of coaching and a little bit of teaching and a little bit of trial and error, you all can be producers of food and take your food sovereignty and your food independence back into your own hands. So don't be afraid. Just start growing something. Just start raising something. Just start doing something. We all can. We all have the power. And with that power comes independence and food freedom. So the third thing, when you think of homesteading and the reasons why you should homestead, is you don't need to know everything to begin. So that's what I'm doing. I'm taking all of my knowledge, all of the experience, I've been farming since I was 5 years old. So, that's 39 years worth of hands-on experience, and I'm taking that and I'm teaching people. If you give a man a fish, he eats for a day, but if you teach a man to garden, man, they eat for a lifetime, or have some chickens or have some cows or have some goats or whatever size, whatever you are able to do. Quail and rabbit. If you live in the city, quail and rabbit, they would be your new best friends. I was actually working at a farm store last summer, and there was this one particular client came in, and she, again, she's trying to worry about, or she's not trying to worry, but this particular client came in and she's worried about where her food's going to come from if shit ever hits the fan. And not that she's panicked and not that she's crazy about it. And I'm not trying to cause fear over this, but this particular woman was going to raise some rabbits, meat rabbits in her backyard, because that's what she's able to do in the space that she has. And it's just brilliant. You don't have to have a big space. And let me tell you, if the grocery store is ever shut down, money and currency is not going to be a thing. It's not going to be important. You want to know what the currency is going to be? Food. Food is going to be the currency. If you have food that you can barter and trade, if the world goes to pot, yeah, you're going to be the popular person on the block. And so why not start doing it just for yourself, just for that sovereignty and just for that food security. So you don't need to know everything to begin. So this woman was just trialing and erroring it in her backyard under her deck, some meat rabbits, throwing them under the deck and seeing how it goes. Many, many, many times over the course of my farming career, I bit off more than I can chew, and you just got to start. That's the thing. So when I started my garden, I had my first acre of garden, and my mother-in-law looked out the window and she said, wow, that's a lot of garden. What are you going to do if it doesn't work? And my ex-husband just said right back to her and said, no, what is she going to do next year if it does work? And so we went from 1 acre of garden to 3 acres of garden to 6 acres of garden to 10 acres of garden to I ended up with 20 acres of garden growing. And so, yeah, like you just bite off more than you can chew sometimes on a homestead, even a small homestead, even in your backyard or on your balcony. And you're just going to do it. And you're going to realize that, have patience with yourself. There's trial and error. I was talking to a customer at a garden center that I work at just the other day, and she said, oh, I can't grow vegetables. Because my first question is, what didn't work for you? And she said, nothing worked. I can't grow vegetables. And so I said, well, what did you grow? And she said, I grew peppers and I grew basil. And I said, ding, 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 ding. You're not the problem. It's you picked the wrong crops. That's the problem. Peppers are a very, very long crop to grow, and you don't get a ton of production off of them because they are such a long crop. And basil is one of the most fussiest plants that you can even possibly grow. And so you're not the problem. The plants you chose are the problem. And so, yeah, you don't need to know everything to begin, but you just begin. Or you hire a coach like me to help you get started. I'll help you solve those problems with saving time and money and energy, and we can get your food production in your backyard. So you don't have to do it perfectly. You just have to get her done. The fourth reason you should have a homestead is growing your own food is a really radical and almost rebellious art. So when we think of rebellion, it's crazy to think that in society right now, the word rebellion and the word rebel is becoming a homesteader, is becoming self-reliant and self-sufficient and not buying into this bigger system. I've been calling our food system out for about 10 years ago, for about 10 years now. I used to sell long English cucumbers to the warehouse, and then the warehouse would sell them to the grocery store and the grocery store to consumer. And eventually it wasn't penciling out. It wasn't working out for me to be able to sell to the warehouse anymore. So then I was going directly to the grocery store. And then the grocery store wanted all this paperwork. The binder of paperwork is probably about a good 6 inches thick. I'm not even joking. A good 6 inches thick to protect in health and safety on being able to sell my vegetables in a grocery store. And I said, no, this is stupid. This is crazy. And so I pulled out of grocery stores then as well. And I was only selling at farmers markets. And then that went sideways too, because I was competing against people, many, many different vendors that bought and sold produce for cheaper than what I can grow and sell it for. And I was the farmer and they weren't. So anyways, that's just my little tirade and rant. But yeah, it's food sovereignty, and growing your own food is actually an act of rebellion. It's an act of independence, and it's an an act of not buying into this bigger system. And I just want to throw it in here too, that I don't fault the farmers. I don't fault the farmers for having to get bigger and bigger and bigger. That's the way agriculture has gone. You've had to either get bigger, or you've had to sell out, or you've had to direct market, or do what you had to do to make your farm work. But it's getting harder and harder and harder. Our small family farms are almost non-existent now because it's getting harder and harder and harder. You just have to get bigger and bigger and bigger to make ends meet. And so this is my predictor. This is a little bit of tinfoil hat conspiracy theory now, but I don't think I'm wrong. I really don't. I think that what's going to happen is power and control, corrupt. And so all these farmers, especially here in Canada, are all being, leveraged by the banks. They've got massive, massive, massive amounts of debt to get bigger. And eventually the bureaucracy in climate change, in whatever you want to call it, is going to come down to the pipes, and it's going to hit a point where it's, Farmer Joe, you do this bureaucracy or we're going to call your loan. And so, yeah, we don't want that dictatorship in our food system. And so again, we, the people, have the power to take back our food system. And it's a radical thing, a rebellious thing, and really a very pleasant thing to be able to grow food in the space you have. And more of us should be doing it. So the fifth reason, and this reason actually warms my heart the most. The fifth reason that someone should have a homestead in the space they have is the children and the kids. There are kids right now that go to a grocery store and think that that's where a carrot comes from. I just did a farmer's market, my first farmer's market in a year and a half. I brought my eggs. And so I was thinking to myself, what can I bring to the market to draw people to my booth? Because, you can't have eggs just sitting out according to the bureaucracy. My eggs are washed, so I've had them in the refrigeration. That's because that's what the rules and regulations dictate to me. And, I can do it. It's a small sacrifice to have fresh eggs at the market. And I was thinking to myself, what can I have in my booth to have people come and stand out? Because 1 dozen eggs sitting on a table is not, very exciting or very pretty or very, inviting. And I actually put a couple of chickens from my flock into a cage, and I brought 2 chickens along to the farmer's market. And all I did all day long was stand there and say, wow, this is how fresh my eggs are. I'm actually the farmer. Look at that. This is how fresh those eggs are. And it was so cool for those kids to come up to when the kids got let out of school later on in the day, the kids just flocked to my booth, and the parents stood there, and we talked about eggs and chickens, and we talked about where our food comes from. That's what we need more of. We need our schools to be teaching these things. We need, homeschooling is a huge thing right now, especially in these movements. And so we need our kids to know where our food comes from. I had a client last year as well. And she told me the story that her daughter pulled some carrots out of the ground or out of their planter box and showed them to someone that was visiting their home. And she said, I grew these carrots. If you take nothing else away from this podcast today, it's that kids need to know where their food comes from, and they are so proud when they can grow it themselves. And so, yeah, kids, our future generations, are the reason that we need to get back to the way living like grandma did. Grandma grew her garden, she did her canning, she had her food system under control, even in the city. And so our kids and our future generations is the reason why we need to learn from our past and learn from our grandmas and grandpas and bubbas and omas and opas and whatever. We need to learn from the past to give it to our future generations. There's been a disconnect, and we, the people, have the power to take back our food system. So that's the most important reason, I think, in all of the reasons I'm giving, to have a homestead in the space you have. So number 6 is mental health. So this story warms my heart. So I had my greenhouse, 36,000 square feet of greenhouse, in the winter time, when it's -30 outside and the sun was shining and the plants were in the greenhouse, it felt like summer inside my building. It was very expensive. My biggest natural gas bill was $12,000 for 1 month, and I couldn't pay it. And it was $22,000 that I owed the next month. but it was warm, it was sunny, it smelled fresh, it was humidity, there was plants, it was green, and the vitamin D that I could get out of that greenhouse was huge. So that was my favorite day, was planting day in the greenhouse. But the joy you get from it, it's meant, it's good therapeutics. I had one staff who worked for me many, many years ago, and she actually suffered from some depression and anxiety and things like that. And I said, "Sure, I'll give you a job. Come on out. You don't, she cried a little bit and things like that. And she was a lovely woman, but she was struggling. And it was so cool to watch this woman. She would put her headset on in going up and down the rows, picking tomatoes or pruning tomatoes or whatever she was doing, that the task she was doing, and she would sing Disney songs in the vitamin D with the plants, doing her work. And you know what? It fixed her mental health. And so if you can get outside, if you're suffering from anxiety, depression, or something like that, plant a garden, do some work, get busy, do something for yourself. And honestly, it will help. It may not fix, but it will help your mental health. The pride and joy that you can feel when you pull, your carrots, or you pick your peas, or you dig your potatoes, or you cut your lettuce and make your salad. The pride and joy and just ego boost, really, when you have grown your own food, is massive. And so, yeah, having a garden fixes mental health, or helps for sure with fixing mental health. And so, yeah, so important. Number 7, the taste and nutrition that you can get out of your own local produce and your own food in your backyard is night and day to anything that you can get in a grocery store. When we think of our grocery stores, even the milk has been homogenized. It's been processed. Our meat has been processed. Sometimes the chicken, they add water to it, or, preservatives and chemicals. When we think of our bread, a loaf of bread used to last only a couple days. A fresh loaf of bread, fresh baked loaf of bread without additives and preservatives, is only going to last you a couple days on your counter. But you look at the bread that we get out of grocery stores. I know of a health food store here close to me, and he bought a loaf of, we're going to call it bread, but it's not really bread. And he put that loaf of bread on the shelf in his store, and it was months and months and months later, and that bread still looked the same. It didn't age at all. It still was soft and supple, and it was gross. That's not food. That's not the wheat that comes off of a farm. And yes, a farm that maybe even sprays their wheat. That wheat is food. The product that comes, once that wheat has left the farm and gone through the processor and 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 the processor, that loaf of bread that you're getting back is not food anymore. The wheat was food, the bread is not. And so it's just about making better choices. And so the nutrition that you get from food that you grow in your backyard is night and day. That beef that you can slaughter in your backyard, the chickens that you are going to butcher in your backyard, they're going to be way less stressed. The best beef I've ever had is the one where the butcher came to my farm, and the cow was in the field eating grass, and then the cow is dead. That is the best beef. That is the way our food system should be. Not this loaded in a trailer, loaded into a feedlot, loaded into and I'm not demonizing feedlots, but loaded into the auction market, loaded into the butcher, loaded into the packing plant or the big warehouse facility. Those animals are stressed, and that a stressed animal is going to give you a totally different flavor and a totally different set of, whatever in their makeup than that beef that was happy eating grass in the field and gone. It's just night and day difference. And that's what we need to get back to: on-farm butchering, on-farm slaughtering, knowing your farmer, knowing where your food comes from. These are novel ideas, not something that's been, bought and sold and, put on a sterile aisles of a grocery store. That's not necessarily the best food. Does it fill you? Is it filler? Yep. But it's not really homegrown food. I can tell you this: my tomatoes. People would always come to my booth when I grew tomatoes, and they would say to me, "I don't like tomatoes," and I'd say, necessarily believe you. Have you had a real tomato before? And they're like, no, 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 I just don't like tomatoes. And I say, well, try my tomatoes. First, I would ask them, is it taste or is it texture? Because if it was texture, I couldn't help them. But I said, if it's taste, I can help you. And most times people would say, well, it's the taste of a tomato. And I had several of my clients, my customers, and my teammates. They were not customers. They were my teammates when I had my farm, my teammates, my people. I missed them. Anyways, they would taste my tomato and they say, oh, I don't like tomatoes, but I like your tomatoes, Dawn. And it was just a night and day difference. My tomatoes tasted like tomatoes, not like cardboard, so simple, yet so novel and so huge. And so, yeah, the taste and nutrients and just the product that you're going to get from a farm or from your own backyard, the tomatoes that you grow in your backyard are going to be so different. The lettuce, the nutrient levels. So we think of spinach. I've heard this before. Spinach that's, packaged and brought up from the States or Mexico or whatever, and we get it here in Canada. The nutrient levels in that spinach by the time we get it in the grocery store, best case that spinach has been picked off their plant or off the roots for, a week. Best case, maybe it's been closer to 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and it's on the tail end of its life cycle. And the nutrients that you're going to get out of that spinach is little to none. And so that's why you should grow a garden in your backyard, is because you're going to get way more flavor, taste, and nutrients out of the stuff that you grow. Even if you had to use a little pesticide, which, we can talk about reasons or what ways that you don't have to, but even if you did something a little unconventional, even if you fed your chickens conventional feed, that egg is going to be a better egg than the one that sat on the shelf for a month and you bring it home and it sits in your fridge. Those are two completely different eggs. And so I just had someone cook up one of my eggs against, some store-bought eggs, and they said night and day difference. They're not even eating the same product and even eating the same things. So yeah, so much different eating from your own backyard. In the space that you have. Hey friends, on Dawn's Dirt, we get real about growing food, farming, homesteading, living free, and digging into the stuff that actually matters. If you're loving the dirt we're dishing out, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow on your favorite social media platforms. That's how we keep growing this community of badass, soil-covered, chicken-loving, freedom-chasing humans. Like and subscribe to me on Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you name it. Come be part of the movement. Number 8, you don't need a farm to be a homesteader. Flash that. You don't need a farm to be a homesteader. I think all of us should be producers. And what I mean by that is all of us should be doing something on the side to gain our independence and to gain our freedom and to, really black market it. I've been to Cuba several times, and my big fascination with Cuba actually is the black market. Seeing how everyone in the community, Cuba's communist, and seeing everyone in the community working together. I've got this and you've got that, and we'll barter and trade and we'll mix and we'll match and we'll, this for that and this for that. And, we'll swing this and we'll swing that. And watching the black market and learning about the black market in Cuba is just fascinating. And they are all small business owners, Everyone in Cuba is a small business owner. And so again, back in the day, back in grandma's day, grandma had zucchini and someone else had tomatoes. Well, you traded for them, if we get back to that, if we ever have to come to a black market situation, we're all going to be experts at it already because we just started it and we've made it part of our day-to-day process. And so no, you don't have to have a big space or a farm to be a homesteader. Just do what you can in the space that you have. If you have a 10 by 10 plot in your backyard, you'd be shocked at how much food you can grow even in that little space, I would suspect you could probably grow enough beans in that space that you would not have to buy beans ever. Beans and lettuce for sure. Plus other things. So yeah, it doesn't have to be this complicated big thing. And if the grocery store shut down and you have beans and lettuce and maybe a few other things in that 10 by 10 garden, guess who's going to be the most popular person on the block? It's not going to be the person, with the fancy Tesla car or the, whatever clothing, brand name clothing. No, it's going to be the person that has some food that they can, work with their friends and neighbors on. So yeah, you want great currency, greater than, gold, silver, dollars, cents, Bitcoin, any of it, grow some food. That is more valuable than all of it put together. So all of you can do it in the space you have, even if you have an apartment building. All of us can become homesteaders. So the ninth reason that you should be a homesteader is in the long run, you save money. So yes, it's an investment up front. If you're going to grow in some planter boxes actually, this is a myth. Planter boxes don't actually grow food as well as just digging into the good old earth that we've been given, digging up some dirt, making some soil, throwing some compost in there. That is the garden that's going to grow the best. The garden that's going to grow the worst is or less is the garden boxes. You can grow in them. There are ways to grow in them, but yeah, it's a little trickier than just planting a good old fashioned garden, just like grandma did, 10 by 10 in your backyard. So look at your backyard right now. If you're listening to this, think about your backyard. Do you have 10 foot by 10 foot of lawn that you can cut up and make garden out of? I don't care if it's in your front yard. I don't care if it's in your backyard. I don't care if it's, down the side of your garage. Where can you put a garden? So yeah, you're going to save money in the long run. So if you think of a package of seeds, a package of garden seeds is just a few dollars, right? So you're going to buy a package of lettuce seed for a few dollars, put it in, and the amount of heads of lettuce that you're going to get out of that package of seeds is massive. A couple dollars traded for, probably 20 or 30 or $40 worth of lettuce. It's night and day difference. And so you will save money in the long run. So when you think of a quail cage or a rabbit pen or backyard chickens, it's a bit of an upfront investment to get the infrastructure. You have to have pens. You have to know how you're going to contain your animals. So important. I just listened to a podcast from Joel Salatin. I've met that man. Great farmer. Don't always agree with 100% of everything that he does, but yeah, he's a smart man, and he's growing food in the spaces he has, and he's teaching others, and he's teaching the governments how to farm differently, and yeah, pretty cool. But anyways, I'm ranting on about that, but you can save money in the long run. So it's a little bit of an upfront cost, yes, but you will save in the long run on your food costs. And so yeah, when you think of preserving and freezing, when you think of I'm here in Alberta. We have this thing called Tabor corn. People go crazy over Tabor corn. Personally, I like corn that I grow on my farm better because it was sweeter, because I got colder nights. And so, yeah, my corn was better than Tabor corn. But if I wanted to preserve corn, if I wanted to freeze corn for my family because it's just better, I would buy a sack of Tabor corn and I would can it up. That's even homesteading. Buying it in bulk, from a farmer, and then turning around and preserving it up yourself. That will save you money in the long run, because those 48 cobs, or usually it's 50 cobs in a sack of corn, will produce you way more frozen corn than buying kernel corn in the grocery store. Sometimes things are cheaper in the grocery store. I've got pigs right now. Buying pork in the grocery store is probably cheaper, probably not better, but I think it's kind of designed like that. I think they're trying to make it so that you have to go to the grocery store for your food, because it's more affordable. But some things are cheaper in the long run if you do it yourself. Like a garden. A garden is cheaper in the long run. Package of seeds, if you can get production, is going to be cheaper than the vegetables you buy in a grocery store. Yeah. And the final reason, and the final thing that you need to remember if you're going to start a homestead, and all of us should become producers in the spaces we have, is start small and grow over time. So with my farm, I can now, after I've grieved, I can hindsight 2020, and I can say, starting with a 36,000 square foot greenhouse and ending up the way I did, where I was trying to sell 100% at farmers markets, it was just too big of a bite. I was too big for the small farmers market system, and I was too small for the grocery system and the bigger warehouse system. And so I was kind of in this world of too big and too small all at the same time. Hindsight 2020, what should I have done? Had I known then what I know now, I wouldn't have built a 36,000 square foot greenhouse. I would have actually just put up some hoop houses and grown in the space that I have and grown 4 markets. I would have cut out the grocery stores completely. I would have cut out all that warehouse and all the bureaucracy. So yeah, start small and grow over time. That's what I'm doing again. Watch me on my journey. Follow me on Instagram, follow me on Facebook, follow my journey and watch me as I grow my next farm. I started off with 150 laying hens. I used to have 299, but I'm down 150 laying hens and, some meat birds. And I'm just starting off small and growing as I go. And so, yeah, you can start off small in your space as well. Start with one pot, one planter, if you don't want to go a 10 by 10 garden, grow a 5 by 5 planter box to start with, and just start with your simple things like lettuce and greens. We all can be homesteaders. We all can grow our own food. And yeah, if you need help with this, if you think, man, all of this sounds so ideal, I would love to be a homesteader. I don't know where to start. I don't know what I'm doing. I feel so overwhelmed by this. Reach out to me. Send me a DM. Send me an email. I'm not great with emails, but send me a DM. Put something in the messages. Call me up even. I don't know. Just reach out and let's get you growing things and producing things and raising things in the space you have. So I do coaching on gardening. I do coaching on animals. I do coaching on preserving. I do coaching on farm to table sales. If you're a small farmer or if you're a small homestead and you want to make a few bucks off your homestead and you want to learn how to make money and save money, reach out to me. That's what I did for many, many years. And I've got coaching clients right now that are starting to make money and save money on the spaces they have. And so all of us can do it. All of us can be producers. All of us can get into the black market while it's not a black market. And all of us can take our food sovereignty into our own hands. So thanks so much for listening to me today. This has been a great episode. If you've got questions, throw it in my DMs and comments too. Together as a community, we can grow our food and grow our homesteads, and all of us should be homesteaders and small producers in the spaces that we have. So thanks so much. Bye.